This is the Iranian Constitution. Preamble. In the name of Allah, the compassionate, the merciful, we sent aforetime our apostles with clear signs and sent down with them the book and the balance that men may uphold justice. The Constitution of the Islamic Republic of Iran sets forth the cultural, social, political, and economic institutions of Iran society on the basis of Islamic principles and norms, which represent the earnest aspiration of the Islamic Ummah. This basic aspiration was made explicit by the very nature of the great Islamic Revolution of Iran, as well as the course of the Muslim people's struggle, from its beginning until victory, as reflected in the decisive and forceful slogans raised by all segments of the populations. Now, at the threshold of this great victory, our nation, with all its being, seeks its fulfillment. The basic characteristic of this revolution, which distinguishes it from other movements that have taken place in Iran during the past 100 years, is its ideological and Islamic nature. After experiencing the anti-despotic constitutional movement and the anti-colonialist movement centered on the nationalization of the oil industry, the Muslim people of Iran learned from this costly experience that the obvious and fundamental reason for the failure of those movements was their lack of an ideological basis. Although the Islamic line of the thought and the direction provided by militant religious leaders played an essential role in the recent movements, nonetheless, the struggles waged in the course of those movements quickly fell into stagnation due to departure from genuine Islamic positions. Thus, it was that the awakened consciousness of the nation, under the leadership of the eminent Marija al-Taliq, Ayatollah al-Zuma Imam Khomeini, came to perceive the necessity of pursuing an ideologically authentic Islamic and ideological line in its struggles. And this time, the militant ulama of the country, who had always been in the forefront of popular movement, together with the committed writers and intellectuals, found new impetus by following his leadership. The beginning of the most recent movement of the Iranian people is to be put at 1382 of the lunar Islamic calendar, corresponding to 1341 of the solar Islamic calendar, or 1962 of the Christian calendar. My friends, if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain a little. Number one, it's free. Two, there's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. Anchor will then distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many, many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you've ever been looking for to make a podcast in one place. Go ahead and download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. The dawn of the movement. The devastating protest of Imam Khomeini against the American conspiracy known as the White Revolution, which was a step intended to stabilize the foundations of despotic rule and to reinforce the political, cultural, and economic dependence of Iran on world imperialism, brought into being a united movement of the people, and immediately afterwards, a momentous revolution of the Muslim nation in the month of Khordad in 1342, or June 1963. Although this revolution was drowned in blood, in reality it heralded the beginning of the blossoming of a glory and massive uprising, which confirmed the central role of Imam Khomeini as an Islamic leader. Despite his exile from Iran after his protest against the humiliating law of capitulation, which provided legal immunity for American advisors, the firm bond between the Imam and the people endured, and the Muslim nation, particularly committed intellectuals and militant ulama, continued their struggle in the face of banishment and imprisonment, torture, and execution. Throughout this time, the conscious and responsible segment of society was bringing enlightenment to the people from the strongholds of the mosques, centers of religious teachings, and universities, drawing inspiration from the revolutionary and fertile teachings of Islam. They began the unrelenting yet fruitful struggle of raising the level of ideological awareness and revolutionary consciousness of the Muslim people. The despotic regime, which had begun the suppression of the Islamic movement with barbaric attacks on the Faidi Madrash, Tehran University, and all other active centers of revolution, in an effort to evade the revolutionary anger of the people, resorted to the most savage and brutal measures, and, in these circumstances, execution by firing squads, endurance of medieval tortures, and long terms of imprisonment were the price our Muslim nation had to pay to prove its firm resolve to continue the struggle. The Islamic Revolution of Iran was nurtured by the blood of hundreds of young men and women, infused with faith, who raised their cries of Allahu Akbar at daybreak in execution yards, or were gunned down by the enemy in streets and marketplaces. Meanwhile, the continuing declarations and messages of the Imam that were issued on various occasions extended and deepened the consciousness and determination of the Muslim nation to the utmost. Islamic Government. The plan of the Islamic government, based upon Wilayat al-Faqih as proposed by Imam Khomeini at the height of the period of repression and strangulation practiced by the despotic regime, produced a new specific and streamlined motive for the Muslim people, opening up before them the true path of Islamic ideological struggle, and giving greater intensity to the struggle of militant and committed Muslims, both within the country and abroad. The movement continued on this course until finally popular dissatisfaction and the intense rage of the public caused by the constantly increasing repression at home and the projection of the struggle at the international level after exposure of the regime by the ulama and militant students shook the foundations of the regime violently. The regime and its sponsors were compelled to decrease the intensity of repression and to liberalize the political atmosphere of the country. This, they imagine, will serve as a safety valve, which would prevent their eventual downfall. But the people, aroused, conscious, and resolute under the decisive and unfaltering leadership of the Imam, embarked on a triumphant, unified, comprehensive, and countrywide uprising. The wrath of the people. The publication of an outrageous article meant to malign Reverend Ulama, and in the particular Imam Khomeini, on 15 Day 1356 or January 7, 1978, by the ruling regime accelerated the revolutionary movement and caused an outburst of popular outrage across the country. The regime attempted to quell the volcano of the people's angers by drowning the protest and uprising in blood. But the bloodshed only quickened the pulse rate of the revolution. The 7th day and 14th day commemorations of the martyrs of the revolution, like a series of steady heartbeats, gave greater vitality, intensity, vigor, and solidarity to this movement all over the country. In the course of this popular movement, the employees of all government establishments took an active part in the efforts to overthrow the tyrannical regime by calling a general strike and participating in street demonstrations. The widespread solidarity of men and women of all segments of society and of all political and religious factions played a clearly determining role in this struggle. Especially the women were actively and massively present in a most conspicuous manner at all stages of this great struggle. The common sight of mothers with infants in their arms rushing toward the scene of battle in front of the barrels of machine guns indicated the essential and decisive role played by this major segment of society in the struggle. It changes everything. My father was my role model. Whatever he set his mind to, he was able to accomplish. That's how he built his two companies with the goal of providing rural areas with internet. His death at 44 changed everything. Even though I was just 12 at the time, I knew nothing would ever be the same. My father left behind little financial support for our family and no life insurance. We were on our own to struggle through the difficult times. Our family's strength crumbled, and our finances grew in disarray. There were times we had no electricity or water because we were so far behind with our bills. When I hit rock bottom, I knew it was only me who could turn things around. That's why I'm working hard to pursue a degree in computer science and engineering. What I'd like to say to you is that the death of a parent changes everything. Because my father didn't have life insurance, I didn't get the luxury of being a child anymore. I had to grow up quickly. Too quickly. Life insurance can't bring back a parent, but it can make the road afterwards easier for those left behind. This is a story by Miranda Rivera, who received the Life Lesson Scholarship from Life Happens, which assists students who are struggling financially to get an education due to a parent dying with little or no life insurance. The price the nation paid. After more than slightly a year of continuous and unrelenting struggle, the sapling of the revolution, watered by the blood of more than 60,000 martyrs and 100,000 wounded and disabled, not to mention billions of tumens worth of property damage, came to bear fruit amidst the cries of independence, freedom, Islamic government. This great movement, which attained victory through reliance upon faith, unity, and the decisiveness of its leadership, at every critical and sensitive juncture, as well as the self-sacrificing spirit of the people, succeeded in upsetting all the calculations of imperialism and destroying all its connections and institutions, thereby opening a new chapter in the history of all embracing popular revolutions of the world. Bahman 21 and 22, 1357, or February 12, 13 and 1979, witnessed the collapse of the monarchical regime, domestic tyranny, and foreign domination, both of which were based upon it, were shattered. This great success proved to be the vanguard of the Islamic government, a long-cherished desire of the Muslim people, and brought with it the glad tidings of the final victory. Unanimously, and with the participation of the Maraji al-Taqid, the ulama of Islam, and the leadership, the Iranian people declared their final and firm decision in the referendum of the Islamic Republic to bring about a new political system, that of the Islamic Republic. A 98.2% majority of the people voted for this system. The Constitution of the Islamic Republic of Iran, setting forth, as it does, the political, social, cultural, and economic institutions and the relations that are to exist in society, must now provide for consolidation of the foundations of the Islamic government, and propose the plan of a new system of government to be erected on the ruins of the previous Taghouti order. The form of government in Islam. In the view of Islam, government does not derive from the interests of a class, nor does it serve the domination of an individual or a group. It represents rather the crystallization of the political ideal of a people who bear a common faith and common outlook. taking an organized form in order to initiate the process of intellectual and ideological evolution toward the final goal, i.e., movement towards Allah. Our nation, in the course of its revolutionary developments, has cleansed itself of the dust and impurities that accumulated during the Taghut past and purged itself of the foreign ideological influences, returning to authentic intellectual standpoints and worldview of Islam. It now intends to establish an ideal and model society on the basis of Islamic norms. The mission of the Constitution is to realize the ideological objectives of the movement and to create conditions conducive to the development of man in accordance with the noble and universal values of Islam. With due attention to the Islamic content of the Iranian Revolution, which has been a movement aimed at the triumph of the Mustafadun over the Mustakabrun, the Constitution provides the necessary basis for ensuring the continuation of the revolution at home and abroad, in particular in the development of international relations. The Constitution will strive with other Islamic and popular movements to prepare the way of the formation of a single world community, in accordance with the Quranic verse, "This is your community, is a single community, and I am your Lord, so worship me," and to assure the continuation of the struggle for the liberation of all deprived and oppressed people in the world. With due attention to the essential character of this great movement, the Constitution guarantees the rejection of all forms of intellectual and social tyranny and economic monopoly, and aims at entrusting the destinies of the people to the people themselves in order to break completely with the systems of oppression. This is in accordance with the Quranic verse, "He removes from them their burdens and the fetters that were put upon them." In creating on the basis of ideological outlook, the political infrastructures and institutions that are the foundation of society, the righteous will assume the responsibility of governing and administering the country in accordance with the Quranic verse, "Verily, my righteous servants shall inherit the earth." Legislation setting forth regulations for the administration of society will revolve around the Quran and the Sunnah, according to the exercise of meticulous and earnest supervision by just, pious, and committed scholars of Islam, is an absolute necessity. In addition, the aim of government is to foster the growth of man in such a way that he progresses towards the establishment of a divine order, in accordance with the Quranic verse, "And toward God is the journeying," and to create favorable conditions for the emergence and blossoming of man's innate capabilities, so that the theomorphic dimensions of the human being are manifested in accordance with the injunction of the Prophet. Mold yourself according to the divine morality. This goal cannot be attained without the active and broad participation of all segments of society in the process of social development. With due attention to this goal, the Constitution provides the basis of such participation by all members of society at all stages of the political decision-making process, on which the destiny of this country depends. In this way, during the course of human development towards perfection, each individual will himself be involved in and responsible for the growth, advancement, and leadership of society. Precisely in this lies the realization of the government of the Mustafadun upon the earth, in accordance with the Quranic verse. And we wish to show favor to those who have been oppressed upon earth and to make them leaders and the inheritors. The economy is a means, not an end. In strengthening the foundations of the economy, the fundamental consideration will be the fulfillment of the material needs of man in the course of his overall growth and development. This principle contrasts with other economic systems, where the aim is concentration and accumulation of wealth and maximization of profit. In materialist schools of thought, the economy represents an end in itself, so that it comes to be a subservient and corrupting factor in the course of man's development. In Islam, the economy is a means, and all that is required of a means is that it should be an efficient factor contributing to the attainment of the ultimate goal. From this viewpoint, the economic program of Islam consists of providing the means needed for the emergence of various creative capacities of the human being. Accordingly, it is a duty of the Islamic government to furnish all citizens with equal and appropriate opportunities, to provide them with work, and to satisfy their essential needs, so that the course of their progress may be assured. Woman in the Constitution. Through the creation of the Islamic social infrastructures, all the elements of humanity that hitherto served as the multifaceted foreign exploitation shall regain their true identity and human rights. As a part of this process, it is only natural that women should benefit from a particularly large augmentation of their rights, because of the greater oppression that they suffered from the Taghouti regime. The family is the fundamental unit of society and the main central for the growth of edification of the human being. Compatibility with respect to belief and ideal, which provides the primary basis for man's development and growth, is the main consideration in the establishment of a family. It is a duty of the Islamic government to provide the necessary facilities for the attainment of this goal. This view of the family unit delivers women from being regarded as an object or as an instrument in the service of promoting consumerism and exploitation. Not only does woman recover thereby her momentous and precious function of motherhood, rearing of ideologically committed human beings, she also assumes a pioneering social role and becomes the fellow struggler of man in all vital areas of life. Given the weighty responsibilities that woman thus assumes, she is accorded in Islam great value and nobility. An ideological army. In the formation and equipping of the country's defense forces, due attention must be paid to faith and ideology as the basic criteria. Accordingly, the Army of the Islamic Republic of Iran and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps are only to be organized in conformity with this goal, and they will be responsible not only for guarding and preserving the frontiers of the country, but also for fulfilling the ideological mission of jihad in God's way. That is, extending the sovereignty of God's law throughout the world. This is in accordance with the Quranic verse, "Prepare against them whatever force you are able to muster, and strings of horses, striking fear into the enemy of God and your enemy, and others besides them." The Judiciary and the Constitution. The Judiciary is of vital importance in the context of safeguarding the rights of the people in accordance with the line followed by the Islamic movement, and the prevention of deviations within the Islamic nation. Provision has therefore been made for the creation of a judicial system based on Islamic justice and operated by just judges with meticulous knowledge of the Islamic laws. This system, because of its essentially sensitive nature and the needs for full ideological conformity, must be free from every kind of unhealthy relation and connection. With the Quranic verse says, "When you judge among the people, judge with justice."